Uh, Hi, I'm John, and I'm a gamer.
Hi, John.
Gaming has come a long way over the last several decades. The debate on whether the medium is art has largely ended with a very conclusive yes, and around the world we're finally seeing people treat it with more of the respect that it deserves. With that in mind, and because I'm just as much of a game talker as I am a game player, I went around to all my gamer buddies to enlist their help in discussing games as art. So, if you love gaming as much as I do, then join us. Trust me, you're among friends. Listen in as we discuss the themes, gameplay, and whatever else comes to mind. It's like a book club, but gaming. Today's topic? Team Fortress 2.
Hello.
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 Hi.
We're doing this in person again.
Yes, we're doing this in person.
Very excited about
Pretty
it.
great.
Hi, and welcome back to Book Club But Gaming, or if it's your first time with us, welcome for the first time. Be sure to check out the other ones. They're all pretty great, I think so.
I would agree.
Yeah. I am John, once again hosting, and with me today are McKenna,
Hi
Adrien,
Hello there.
and Sami.
Hi.
This is the same group that we had last time. We were talking about Smash Brothers Melee, and now we're doing the second versus style game that we've done so far on the podcast, I believe. This week, we're doing Team Fortress 2. There's a lot of history to this game, a lot of community building aspects to it. I think most of the people around this table actually know a lot more about it than I do, so I'm really excited to use this as an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the culture that was built around the game that I didn't experience all the way through. But to start, we just listened to that theme music, and we just watched a couple of the animated shorts before hitting record. What are you guys thinking right now? How are you guys feeling?
there. I'm feeling pretty jazzed.
Oh yeah, I mean this is a game that I have probably 16 or 1700 hours in, so I'm very happy to be talking about it.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've played TF2 or kind of been immersed in everything around it, so it's fun to be back.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a trip going back into it and playing it, and watching the shorts is such a blast from the past. I was really getting into it around the time I went to college, 2010.
Mm-hmm.
I know that wasn't when the game first hit, and obviously it didn't peak at that time either. When did you all first start playing Team Fortress 2?
I got Team Fortress 2 when it came out with the orange box in 2007, I believe it was, and but I didn't play it when I got it. I got the orange box because I wanted to play Half-Life 2, and then ended up trying out Team Fortress 2 like a year or two later in college, probably late 2008 and early 2009, and then that was just like the game that, in terms of like competitive shooters, or at least multiplayer, shooters, that was the one that I played for years.
So the orange box, I think the third game was Portal?
Yeah, so the orange box was 5 games.
Oh, okay.
Because it was Half-Life 2 and then Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and Episode 2, and then it also had Portal and Team Fortress 2.
Okay. Adrien?
Yeah, so similar to Sami, I bought the orange box in 2007 and first played on my very first gaming PC, and I think I bought it digitally. It was like my first foray into like digital purchases, and yeah, that's like when I made my Steam account.
Yeah, I mean, you had to make a Steam account in order to play the orange box. Like,
Yeah.
that was the first. I think there was like definitely some media attention even on that like you had to get a Steam account in order to play some of the or the games in the orange box, and there were some people who were like very opposed to it.
Yeah,
Which did actually kind of make sense because it was a change from before, but now looking back at it, it's like that's where everything went.
yeah.
And is that true for if you got the Xbox version as well? Like, you needed to log into...
No, I think it would have been through Microsoft's thing.
I have no idea.
But I think the Xbox version of TF2 was always kind of a bastardized version.
Or at the very least, it certainly didn't get anything like the updates that
Yeah.
the PC version did. Like, the Xbox version is much, much closer to the release version.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've heard a lot of people who play a lot of first-person shooters say that any console version of a first-person shooter that you can play with a mouse and keyboard would be a bastardization.
Well, here I think is more just that like Valve is such a PC like focused company, and I think the Orange Box is one of very few games or packs of games that they even made for
console.
a console.
Yeah.
And I think that's more what it is. I think actually Team Fortress 2 theoretically could be one that would work actually fairly well on a console because it's not a super precise like game for the most part, other than Sniper, where your pinpoint accuracy is not the most important thing. Unlike most other shooters, where
like
the
Counter-Strike
mouse and
or
keyboard
something.
really makes such a huge difference compared to playing on a controller.
Yeah.
There is a heavily chaotic nature to Team Fortress 2, I think, that like really contributes to that. Like you're not really trying to go in there super precise. You're mostly trying to keep your head on your shoulders. But McKenna, you had told me that you haven't really dabbled too much into playing Team Fortress 2.
I have never played Team Fortress 2.
So at all.
So
but you're a huge fan of the all the stuff around the
oh my
franchise,
gosh,
right?
like animations, the things that people come up with are pretty remarkable. I love the animations. I love the sound bites. I initially, this is really kind of bizarre, but when the first time I heard about Team Fortress 2, I was watching an upload from Little Karibo. He's the guy who did Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series. Back in the day, he sometimes re-released redubs of his first episode. And this time, he used voice lines from TF2 characters in order to recreate the first episode. And I was like, oh my gosh, these voices are hilarious. I need to check this game out. I need to learn a little bit more about it. And then I started watching the animations and then Source filmmaker stuff that was extremely cursed, but we'll save that for a little later on down the line.
I really do feel like it's thanks to YouTube, and I mean I'm sure it would have happened one way or the other, but in the reality that we do live in, it is in large part thanks to YouTube that we have such a community built around not just playing video games, but watching other people play video games. Like games are no longer just for gamers. And I think this is a perfect example of that because I definitely, before playing Team Fortress 2 ever, had seen the animations and just thought they were hilarious. I mean, at least as many as were out, because it took about 5 years for the entire Meet the Team series to be completed. Yeah. Which is not bad for something they're doing to promote a free-to-play.
Well, it wasn't at the beginning.
Well, it wasn't always, but I mean, even when it wasn't free-to-play, I mean, I feel like they were always running some kind of a sale or another on Steam. So by the time I did get to it, I think I got it because a friend was like, hey, there's a Steam sale on right now if you've never played Team Fortress 2. And this is a friend from high school. We had just recently gone to separate colleges and we're looking for ways to stay connected. Mm-hmm. And she should pick up the game on Steam, and I got it for I think $2.
Nice.
Yeah, they did get it. It was very cheap quite often a couple of years after release. But even if you think 2010, that's already 3 years after the game came out. It came out in 2007, so that's not an unreasonable timeline to see some discounts on a game.
That's true.
Unless you're Nintendo.
Damn, throwing some shade.
By the way, Doug Bowser, if you're on again, or for the first time, we don't know.
Yeah, I do think so much about TF2's the culture, the aura around it is, was so dependent on the situation that it was released into. So you had early YouTube where it was. I think when TF2 first released, YouTube was still on 10-minute videos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 15-minute cutoff.
Yeah.
Remember?
I remember.
And, this was very much kind of pre-Twitch era, where it's not like you could just log on and watch somebody playing the game. So, Valve really leveraged the kind of the social media of the time in order to get their game out there.
For a while, I feel like YouTube wasn't doing too much work in trying to add variety to the front page. So if you were looking at the most popular videos, it would have been mostly gaming videos at the time, right? And I think a lot of that would have been Team Fortress 2. Probably.
I think the other thing is also that the Meet the videos, they were really different promotional videos from anything that any game company had ever done before.
Yeah.
What game company for a multiplayer, class-based shooter is creating full characters for those classes? Nobody did that.
And down the line, lore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Like if you look at the like Valorant or Overwatch or those kinds of games of today, like it very clearly comes from Team Fortress 2.
Yes.
Yeah, honestly, they're the kings and queens of innovation in the gaming industry. Like, they are always ahead of the curve.
I'd agree. Like, and then they get to a point ahead of the curve, and then they just stop. They stop at 2.
They're afraid of 3.
They're afraid of 3s.
I mean, they got Alex, so...
That was a prequel, though.
I know, but it still happened.
Yeah, I know.
That's true. Well, technically, Team Fortress 1 was actually a mod on, I think, Quake.
Yeah,
So-
like back in 1999.
So that wasn't technically Valve, right?
No.
So,
Or,
okay.
I'm sorry, Quake came out in 1996, and then
Team Fortress Classic was...
yeah, Team Fortress Classic. It was based on Team Fortress, which was a mod that came out in 1999.
So TF Classic was Valve then.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And
I think they probably they hired some of the people that made the mod, which is often what they do. I mean, that they'll hire people who did something cool and then make it.
Yeah.
So pretend I know nothing about Team Fortress Classic or the mod version of it, because I don't. What are they? Different classes, different characters?
Yeah.
How much is different between 2 and 1?
So if I haven't played it, but if memory serves, it is a class-based shooter, but they don't have the same kind of characterization that the classes do in 2.
And also the gameplay style is much more similar to like the Battlefield of the day, that kind of like actual more realistic visuals, and then in terms of weapons and stuff too, they're much closer to sort of the like normal guns rather than the crazy stuff that they have in TF2.
Yeah.
So 2 is when it would start to define that kind of cartoon
Yes.
personality that it has.
That was actually, again, like sort of a bit of a controversial choice for a lot of people who had played Team Fortress Classic, and they saw Team Fortress 2 and they're like, what
What
are
is
you
this?
doing? Like, this looks absolutely nothing like the game that you are calling this the like follow-up to.
Yeah. What's interesting is that there are some images of the early development of TF2 when they were still going with the with more realistic style. There's like a picture of a heavy, like, crouching in a bunker with like a machine gun. And, it looks nothing like the finished product.
And one of the things, I remember these images as well, and one of the reasons that they changed it and went in the cartoony direction was that they realized that they wanted to have really easily identifiable silhouettes for every single class.
Yep.
So that you could see immediately, without having to like see any detail, the moment you saw anything of the silhouette of a particular character, you could tell exactly what class it was.
Yeah.
And that still holds true despite all the crazy hats and stuff. Like as soon as you see like even a small part of the character model for one of the characters in TF2, you know what character it is.
And not just the character, but I think a lot of times you could see what weapon because all the weapons look very different from each other. It's not just like, what submachine gun is that you would say in Call of Duty. Although in Call of Duty wouldn't matter.
Doesn't matter anyways.
But there's that level of variety, and like, so you're able to customize the way your loadout, and then other people are able to see what that loadout is and make their decisions based upon it.
Yes.
In a split second, which...
So were loadouts a thing when you started playing TF2?
Yes.
Because they weren't when the game came out.
No, so it was like 2010 or 11 when I started playing it, and to some degree they were. Like, I don't know if they were quite as deep as it is now, because I've only dabbled, but like you could change your hat. You could change your melee weapon, and I think you could change your gun or something like that.
Yeah. They had, I think they early on they started having like 2 like guns basically for each one.
Well, what they did was that it started with the medic update.
Yeah.
Where they started doing updates for every class, and when they did, you would have you could unlock some of the new weapons. So it started out just the medic had options.
Right. Yeah. But little by little, they started increasing. But yeah, at the very beginning of the game, when the game came out, there were no options. Yeah. You had the class, and the class had its weapons, and that was it.
Yep.
You had no choice.
But
which was fine, because it was already, a lot of classes that had played extremely differently.
Yeah, which is, I think, something that Team Fortress as a franchise sort of added to the first-person genre. I can't think of any games that did it before that, but I can think of plenty of games that have done something similar since then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think there was a class-based shooter where the guns and the way that the classes played was so varied before that.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, there were absolutely, classes and stuff, but they generally had similar guns.
Yeah.
And now with this game, not only do you have classes that can be identified immediately just on the way they look or their silhouette, they also have full personalities thanks to all of these superfluous. I'm an English major. Superfluous extra media. And McKenna, since this is your area of expertise, and since you've kind of really dug deep into all of that, I want to get your take on this first. What is your favorite character and why, and then your least favorite character and why?
Oh man, that's like trying to choose a favorite child.
I know, Sophie's choice it.
Oh gosh. Probably as far as like the animation goes, my favorite is the Pyro. This animation came out a little bit later than everybody else.
It was the last one.
It was the last one. And to see like Pyro Vision, where he's running around with a lollipop and a bubble gun and riding on top of a balloonicorn, and then like he's causing all kinds of chaos and destruction in his path. It's like, oh my gosh, I love this character. He doesn't even talk all that much. He just kind of mumbles in a muffled voice.
Such an interesting way to like go out on, or such an interesting video to go out on. Of course, they would later do a couple of other ones. We just watched the 3 Days to Live or Expiration Date.
Expiration Date, yeah.
But we didn't at the time. We couldn't have known that those ones were going to come out.
Yeah.
We would have thought the Pyro was the last one, and what a crazy imaginative one to go out.
Yeah, it was great. I laughed so hard.
To be completely honest, I think, and I don't know this, I have no actual corroborating evidence, but I think it's probably that it was the last one because it was the one that they had the most trouble trying to figure out how they were going to do it. How do you do a meet the trailer for a character that doesn't speak and we don't necessarily even know what gender they are?
Yeah, there's been a lot of debate actually on Game Theorists. They really dug deep about how what the gender is for the Pyro.
Is this Matt Pat Game Theorist?
Yep.
Oh, shout out to Matt Pat.
We love you. But yeah, it was Matt Pat he's wild. His theories go a little bit overboard sometimes, but they're really fun to watch.
I'm going to leave it to the viewers to go and get the full context of that video before taking our summaries as the entirety of Matt Pat's viewpoints of the world.
Yeah.
Because I think I do remember that video being well, you guys, I trust you, the viewers. Go get the context.
We believe in you.
Yeah. And the least favorite.
Oh man. To be honest with you, I don't really have a least favorite, but the one that is kind of most annoying to me is probably the soldier. I love the soldier. I think he's wonderful, but his video is not one that I'm going to return to. So, or at least not as often as the others.
Why not?
I don't know. For whatever reason, it didn't grab me as heavily as, say, I don't know, the sniper. The end lines of the snipers were just so good, where he's on the phone with his parents.
I think it's probably because this Meet the Soldier was, if not the first, it was the second of the Meet the trailers. Because I forget if it was Meet the Soldier or Meet the Engineer that came out first, but
it wasn't Engineer.
I don't think so. I think it might have been Soldier. And I do think that it's a pretty good representation of the soldier, not only as a character, but as their gameplay goes. It's pretty straightforward. He's the soldier character of this first-person shooter. Mm-hmm. He has rockets. He has guns and stuff like that. And it's not meant to be super complicated. It's a really good entry point for anybody who's played any kind of FPS to get into this really silly take on the genre. Mm-hmm. So because of that, I guess it doesn't have a really clever twist like the Spy video does have, or anything super crazy and imaginative like the Pyro's one does. Mm-hmm. So it's really fun to watch once, but like one of those styles of action movies, maybe you wouldn't go back to it.
Mhm.
Like,
Though I will say there are a couple of great lines in that one.
You wanna share, Sami?
The line about basically Sun Tzu was like, you know, an art of war.
He invented art.
Yeah, no,
war.
he knows a bit more about war than you do because he invented it, and then he perfected it, and used his fight money to buy 2 of every animal and loaded them onto a boat and then beat the crap out of every single one of them. and that's why anytime there's a group of animals together in one place, it's called a zoo, unless it's a farm.
Yeah, it was. I still love that animation, but it's not one that I would go back to as often.
What a great personality, though. I really love like the backstory too to him. If you like read the comics, like he taught himself how to rocket jump.
Mm-hmm.
Or didn't he get rejected from all forms of military?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he decided to go fight anyways.
Yeah, he flew himself to Germany in World War II.
Didn't he do it after World War II and he just went and fought people?
I wouldn't put it past him. How about you, Adrien? Favorite?
Oh, the favorite meet of just the meet the videos.
Yeah.
Or just character for any reason.
Oh, okay. Probably the soldier. I think. I mean, just for all the reasons we've already talked about. You know, he's just freaking hilarious.
He's so stupid.
Yeah.
Great shooter.
Although the heavy is also up there.
Yeah.
I don't really have a least favorite character, honestly.
They're all so good.
Yeah.
And any classes that you just wouldn't play?
You know, I don't really play engineer.
No.
But that's because it's just kind of not my style.
I'm surprised about that. You and Sami are the ones who got me into Factorio. And I think since we started, I started playing Factorio, I've become more interested in playing as the engineer. Because it's like, where should I put this turret and all that stuff, all the thinking, and yeah, same reason as last time we were talking about why I love playing as Ness and Melee. It's like, yeah, some of that area control can seem a little cumbersome, but it's so satisfying when you get it right.
Yeah.
How about you, Sami?
I think my favorite character is hard to say, but it might be the medic, because he's just such a insane homicidal doctor that is clearly not licensed anymore because of some of the things that he did. And then I think actually probably my least favorite would just be the heavy, because I think that he just has a little bit less sort of that zany, insane, like character to him. He's a bit more straightforward in a way, I think.
Well, I mean, there's hilarity in how basic he is.
Yeah.
He loves his guns. He names his guns. They are his babies. He loves sandwiches. And he has amazing insults. And a great screamy voice.
Yeah, but he is, he's just less amusing to me because he is so much more straightforward in his insanity than any of the other characters. All the other characters are insane in really creative and interesting ways.
Yeah.
I think I would have, a long time ago when I was first playing it, I would have said Scout. Just because I really liked the speed of it. I really liked feeling spry, and I would die a lot, so if I died I could get back into the action relatively quickly. But I think I've gotten older now, so this last time I tried to play, I was like, yeah, I don't think I can quite keep up with the Scout anymore. Maybe I want to hang back and be a support player, which I would have never done when I was a kid. When I was younger, I would have never been the medic or even the engineer. But I did play some engineer this time, and I really liked it. And I played a little bit of medic, and I actually really liked that too, because whereas before I wanted all the glory, now I just want to feel like I'm helping in any small way,
contributing to the team effort
with a little bit less pressure. Although that didn't turn out to be the case because everybody's calling for the medic all the time.
Right.
Yeah, a really good medic is a huge asset.
Oh yeah.
That can completely change the performance of a team very, very quickly. So I think but being a really good medic is not easy, because you do have to be very aware of where everybody is and healing people, constantly jumping from target to target, and then constantly also avoiding dying.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is more than other characters. With the medic, you need to be charging your Uber, so you actually need to stay alive.
For least favorite, I would say sniper, just because I've never been a good sniper. in these games. Like,
Yeah,
my accuracy is already for shit, but if you want to put me like that far away and be like, yeah, just take them out while they're all dancing around like little hopper gnats on a leaf and trying to hit them with a rubber band, like, no, this isn't gonna work. Not for me. I really respect that skill set that people can get. I also think it transfers well into pretty much any FPS.
Yeah.
If you're a good sniper, like, you can do things like no scope. And all power to you. I really respect it, but I'm just not capable.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all these characters, which do you guys think would get the best, like, if they got their own TV show spinoff? 22-minute episodes, occasional cameos from the others, but for the most part, this is that person's story.
The sniper.
The sniper.
Yeah,
Why?
because he's the most cool, calm, and collected, but also still insane of the group. And I think that, you know, like, you could tell an interesting story around him that wouldn't be absolutely just like him murdering a bunch of people, like because he felt like it, which I feel like could happen for pretty much any of the others except for maybe the spy as well.
I think actually the engineer would be pretty fun to have
Oh yeah.
a show about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just
His-
playing his guitar.
Yeah, his meet the video is great. He's just playing the guitar as his turrets go ape shit.
I solve problems, not philosophical, or like not problems like what is beauty, because that would fall under the conundrums of what you'd call philosophy. I solve practical problems.
Yeah.
I can see that.
I honestly think that Spy would be really fun to have a series about. Just because, like, I want to see what the hell he gets up to, like, in his spare time. I know that he's a classy gentleman. I feel like he could be like the next James Bond, but a lot cooler and more chaotic. I feel like that would be a really fun series.
If done really well, I agree. The only caution I would take if I were approaching it would be, like, I think a lot of the fun from the spy comes from the mystery. So it's like, in this last animation with the expiration date, when he goes to visit him and he's like, oh, Spy has a smoking room. You're like, oh, well, of course he does. I would have never expected it. So if you could keep coming up with little things like that to throw in every episode, like, that would be awesome.
Valve,
Like,
if you're listening.
Yeah, Spy show.
Spy show.
Yeah, I think realistically, if they did that, it would probably be Scout.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah.
I could see that being pretty funny, especially again after the expiration date. Like, then you could see him trying to pick up ladies, and but would that work long term? How many seasons do you think you could get out of that?
I think that probably like one season, realistically.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can shift over to another character for the
true.
next
We could do
season.
a season for each character.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be pretty fun.
Then we could do an Avengers-style Team Fortress 2 movie.
I mean, we already have, like, the shorts, so... Just tie them all together, turn it into a film.
Everything's got to be a franchise. There's comic books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys know? There's like this whole backstory about the two twins, I guess, or just two brothers that have been fighting over the same plot of land for decades.
The fact that they actually went into that much effort to give backstory to a game that doesn't need it at all is fantastic.
Yeah, and again, for a game that isn't probably making all that much money even anymore. Like, when you think about it, like...
Yeah, it probably isn't making a lot anymore, but it made a lot of money for a very long time.
Yeah.
But how long ago did that, the expiration date video come out?
7 years ago?
7? Okay,
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think also it's interesting that TF2, you know, we kind of talked about the culture and everything. It really was an ecosystem rather than a game.
In a way, yeah.
What do you mean?
Because it was so tied up with Steam, so tied up with the Steam marketplace for a long time. It was so tied up with all of the external media, like the YouTube shorts and the comic books. Like, there was this entire ecosystem just to pull people into playing a class-based shooter, which is a very well-designed class-based shooter, but it's fundamentally a really simple game.
Yeah. I think that simplicity really adds to that, because it's like Mario Kart. If you had to focus on changing your gears and doing all the other really complicated stuff that really goes into driving, then you wouldn't be able to do all these crazy loop-de-loops or watch out for red shells.
You know what's really interesting? I just thought of this, and this is a little bit of a tangent from what we were just talking about, but there is that simplicity that yet still works really well for TF2 because I've been playing a lot of Apex Legends in the last couple years, and when I go and play other modern shooters that don't have movement that is as fluid and smooth as the movement in Apex, I feel very like clumsy and awkward because I just want to move the way that I do in Apex. But then when I was playing Team Fortress 2 this morning, I didn't feel that at all because the game is just so well built around the exact way that characters move, and everything within it is interacts well in such a way that the you don't feel like you're missing something.
Yeah.
Which I feel quite often with other games where it's just like there's good stuff about this, but I wish I could move like I do in Apex or something.
Yeah, and I think the salient point there is the game was masterfully created.
Yeah.
They spent a lot of time prototyping, and the fact that the classes are so different speaks to how much time they probably spent developing each one.
And what's I think really remarkable about it is with the different loadouts, it's not really even the number of base classes. You have to multiply that by several times to really get the number of different weapon combinations that you could have in a single team.
Yeah, to be fair, like there are some loadouts that are transformational, like if you do a demo night or something, which is very, very different from your standard demo man. But also a lot of the changes in loadouts have like moderate effects on how
That's
you play
true.
the character, or even minor effects.
That's true.
Like if you swap out your gun as a medic, it doesn't matter that much.
I'd say it does actually.
Really?
I think the medic guns are one of the more.
Oh, sorry. I mean the
Oh,
gun,
okay,
not
gotcha.
not the meta gun.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
I was like, what are you talking about?
no. If you switch over to like the crit one, I mean that's a completely different. You're going to play the medic completely differently.
Same thing with the quick fix. You play completely differently from the normal medigun.
Yep.
What's the last one? The one that gives you the different resistances. I forget the name of that one, but that one I never really liked as much. But the Kritzkrieg, the medigun, and the quick fix are
They play very differently.
Love all three of them for very different situations.
Yeah. But if you use the lifesteal gun over the normal,
the Bloodsaga over the normal medigun,
it just doesn't.
Small
yeah.
Yeah, or if you use I think a lot of the secondary weapons matter less unless you're like the demo with the charge and targe or something like that.
Although actually, I mean, the demo man has I think one of the most like varied arsenal because he's got not only the different like sort of grenade launchers which have quite different like feels, but not necessarily completely different gameplay. But then his secondary weapons, you've got the sticky bomb launcher, you've got the lock and load, which is the one that has a longer, sort of delay on exploding the mines. And that one, like very significantly, even with a small change, it really significantly changes how you play him because you can't use it just like as a fire and then like explode. You have to set up traps and stuff, and it's just not capable of doing what you would do with it normally. Then you have the charge and targe and the different shields, which are there's some differences between the shields, but they're not huge. And then you also have the sticky jumper, which is allows you to do tons of sticky jumps without taking damage, but it entirely removes damage. Like you can't damage enemies with that gun.
Yeah, but then you look at like Soldier, for example, where the different rocket launchers kind of doesn't matter that much. It still shoots rockets. And like
again, I kind of disagree with you.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple of them that are similar, right? Like you've got the normal one, and then you have the direct hit, which are very similar for sure. And so is the black box.
Yep.
But then you have the rocket jumper. Then you have the beggar's bazooka, which is you have to like load individual, like you load the rockets and then you have to like release and it'll fire as many rockets as you loaded in that time. But you can't like fire, like one. You have to, when you hold down the fire button, it starts loading rockets. So you need to time your like when you start loading very carefully so that you come around a corner to like fire like all those rockets very, very quickly at somebody because that's what it does.
Was it like Dead Man's Trigger though, or is it like if you're holding on to it for a certain amount of time, it's just going to start firing?
Eventually, it will fire all 4 of them like bam, 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 bam. So you have to like time it well.
You're going to end up shooting it at a
wall in
wall
front
right in front of you. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the big thing is that came out after I stopped playing
Yeah,
games, so I don't even know
just,
about
yeah,
it.
you're describing a bunch of stuff that
And
I
then
hadn't really
and then
got
there's
with.
one other one that I forget the name of that one, but it's a rocket launcher that fires very slowly when you're on the ground, but it fires very quickly when you're like rocket jumping in the air. So you combine it with the parachute. So you rocket jump into the air and then you fire while you're parachuting down. And often, if you get high enough, you can even like reload a little bit and fire more. And the other interesting thing about that one is that if you get a kill with it, every kill that you get adds another rocket of like clip size. Magazine size to the gun.
That's cool.
Until you die, obviously. So if you can get like 3 kills, all of a sudden you go from having 4 shots per magazine, and you usually use one of them to rocket jump, so you only get 3 shots when you're in the air. To you can have like 6 or 7 or 8. So then you can be like up in the air and then just bam, 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 bam,
Just raining fire.
Yeah,
like it's Dune. Oh, that's insane. So is there like I never really got into watching any competitive Team Fortress 2. Was it a game that was held in the highlight? Yeah. Okay.
There was a lot.
Sami's
There was a
making
lot of
it.
it. Interestingly, though, I know that folks considered it to be a bit more of a party game, and competitive. The meta was pretty focused.
Yes. Yeah. Like competitive TF2 was a very different game from casual TF2.
Yeah.
Like it was a different game. It wasn't even that like people played much more like focused. It's that you played TF2 entirely differently if you were playing competitive, and there were only certain classes that people really played.
Yeah.
So plus also it was usually 6v6 rather than 12v12.
So there's a little bit of a tier system going, or is it just like those are the only classes available to you?
No, there was a tier system, but it was a pretty strong hierarchy when you have 6 players per team, where like certain classes just aren't viable.
You're not going to see 3 spies on a 6-person team playing competitively.
No.
You hardly ever saw spies
No.
at all. Because with only 6 players who are communicating well together, it was really easy to be like, oh, they have a spy, keep an eye out.
Yeah.
Were there any double ups that would happen?
Yeah. Usually it was, you'd have like, often it was like 2 soldiers or 2 demo men. You might have 1 heavy occasionally, but it wasn't common. It was 2 scouts. So quite often it was like 2 scouts, 2 soldiers, a demo man, and a medic, I think was the like.
Yeah, you'd always have a medic.
Yeah. Had to have medic. You could not like win competitive without
Yeah.
medic.
Overhealing is just so important.
And would they be using the healing gun and not any of those other new ones that you were? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally you'd see Kritzkrieg in competitive play, but not very often. It was usually the standard medigun, and then the quick fix was almost never used because it was just like. Well, actually, it's because the quick fix is really good for healing a large amount of health very quickly, but your health pool when you only have 5 other players that you're healing as the medic is not that big. So you can heal all of the players on a competitive team very easily with the normal medigun. So you have no advantage from taking the quick fix. And a significant disadvantage because you don't get a maneuver that makes people invincible.
Yeah.
It just gives them, like faster healing.
One thing that you did mention that I started thinking about is you mentioned that the team sizes, and I know 12v12 is the like Valve standard game size, and I remember a lot of servers would actually go way over that.
16v16.
And interestingly, the game's balance starts going out the window when you increase the team sizes that much.
Yes.
And interestingly, there's some other things that servers would play around with, like respawn times that are actually really important. You really can't mess around with those because the game's respawn system is very carefully tuned in order to make it so that the games do eventually end. Like if you have instant respawns, then nobody will win because as soon as you start pushing next to their base, they start respawning so quickly that you're never going to actually finish the game.
Do you guys think that there could ever be a Team Fortress 3, or do you think it's be kind of like a moot point? Sort of, we had this conversation, right, kind of when we were talking about Death Road to Canada. I think, like, where it's just like, do we want to see an actual sequel to this game, or do we just want to see more stuff continually added to it?
I mean, there isn't going to be more stuff added to it at this point anymore. Valve is really not supporting it anymore much. You know, like they're barely making some small patches to it to try to address some of the bot problems that are in the game.
Yeah, I mean, also they one of the updates from last year, because Soldier's voice actor Rick May passed away. He also voiced Peppy Hare and Andros in Star Fox 64.
Oh no.
Yeah, he passed away due to COVID complications. So, but anyway, they made a permanent statue in the game as a tribute to him, and it's the soldier saluting, and underneath it says Rick May 1940 to 2020, and underneath of it says, "That was a hell of a campaign, son."
Oh my god, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
They would do that. Where's the statue? Is it in one of the stages?
It's in one of the stages.
I think it's Payload Gold Rush, maybe?
I think so.
I forget which, but yeah.
That's so cool. And he was the same voice as Peppy Hare?
Yep, he was the one who did do a barrel roll.
And now that you mention it, like, I could see it. Like, I could hear it. Like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I would have never guessed that. Wow, he was a bigger part of my childhood than I would have expected.
Yeah. The voice actors don't get enough credit.
No, they don't. We should really be paying more attention to that. So let's talk a little bit about the voice acting. Like, what's your favorite of the voices? If you were to, like shorts aside, you hear some of the voices sometimes when you're playing the game too, right? Like
Constantly,
all the time. So, what's your favorite voice? And if you could like do an impression of one of them, can you?
Soldier, definitely Soldier.
Okay. Want to try doing an impression?
No.
I think Soldier's probably the one that I get the closest to doing the voice of. But I've already done it a couple times.
You do a pretty good scout too.
If you were from where I was from, you'd be dead.
You'd be dead.
That Brooklyn accent. But yeah, let's talk more about, should there be a follow-up to the game?
True, yeah, we didn't really talk about it.
We didn't really talk about it. I think yes. I don't know if it would be. To me, the only satisfying way to do it would be to come up with a whole new cast.
Interesting.
But I don't understand. Then again, the classes are so well built and balanced at this point. It's like, would you just start with new classes, or would you just be like the Golden Sun 3 route of this is everybody's kids? Like, if so,
the JRPG sequel.
Yeah, the JRPG sequel route. Yeah, this is just everybody's kids now, and they're doing the same thing that their parents did.
It's the exact same characters, but we changed their hair around.
And one of their voices.
And sometimes gender flip them.
Gender bender. Oh my god, it could be all girls next time.
That would be
why not?
hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, you would get like the gamers who are like, no, the liberals are trying to feminize everything, and it's like, come on.
Go for it. Feminize everything.
Exactly.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think making a TF3 would be very, very challenging.
Oh, yeah.
Just because TF2 just defined everything so well. Like, following that one would be hard, and just because it's had such a long run, like, it would be amazing to see it brought to a modern engine and everything. It's just, how would you, and there'd be some initial hype, but trying to follow that with, like, how do you keep building on something that's basically already done, it would just be so hard.
And also, it would be entering a very different market.
Yes.
Because now it's not the only class-based, shooter of its type anymore.
Yeah.
You now do have Overwatch and Overwatch 2 coming soon, and Valorant, and Paladin was another one that was out a couple years ago. I don't know if it's actually popular anymore.
I don't think so.
But there's several others of these kinds of games, and so how does it differentiate itself as a new game? Because TF2 still has a pretty active community of players that play it.
Yeah.
But would they go to a new game, a new Team Fortress that felt different from Team Fortress 2, because it would have to for it to be like,
a sequel.
A sequel.
So I think like having new characters and maybe a couple of new classes might be like the only way, because you could build them into the same world, that same silly world with all that personality, which I think why it's still a successful game today. Because if you play Overwatch, it has personality, but it's a very different kind of personality.
Yeah.
There's like a simplicity to the fact that everyone's names are their class, and like how they could either be on the red or the blue team depending on which animated short you're watching.
And here's the other thing as well that I think really helps, for me at least, I like about Team Fortress 2 over Overwatch. There's a couple of things. But one of them is that you only have that set number of classes. They've never added a new class.
Yep.
And so even if they have a different weapon set, you still only have that set number of silhouettes that you need to look for, and that set number of names that you need to remember. Like, man, I went back and played Overwatch after not playing it. I mean, this was like a year ago. I went back and played Overwatch for a little bit after not playing it for years, and I was just like, who are all these characters?
Yeah.
And how do I couldn't remember their names for a long time, so my call-outs when I was playing with some friends got horrible because I was just like, the guy! Like, I don't know what their name is, but there's a guy over there.
Yeah, I mean, another huge... One thing that TF2 really is different from the other class-based or character-based shooters now is that things like Overwatch are kind of like MOBA hybrids.
Yes.
Where, you have all these abilities and you have ultimates and stuff, while with TF2, there's basically none of that. You have your weapons, and some of them act very differently than a gun, but you basically come out of the gate and you've got your stuff. You don't have cooldowns or anything like that. That could be a direction to take if they wanted to. I don't think it would be a particularly good direction, but it is a direction. That's a pretty
I think it would make it less of a Team Fortress game.
Yeah. The sort of MOBAization of the genre is something that definitely happened after the game was finished updating.
Yes.
What about instead of a direct sequel? Because I think you're right. They've kind of perfected what Team Fortress can be as far as like the form that it has now. So instead of trying to make a Team Fortress 3, which would be the same game format but making whatever changes you would, you could do something like a spin-off title like Team Fortress, like that's got more of a campaign emphasis, that you play co-op style, like maybe the Left 4 Dead franchise, and that way you could actually explore the lore and the plot in the game itself rather than like going to like comic books and stuff like that. Because something I would really like to see would be like, this is a battle that's been happening for generations over a plot of land which canonically had almost no value,
right?
To begin with. So like, and it's just two brothers that I think are dead by the time Team Fortress 2 is like kicking. Are they dead, or are they just like?
I think they're like kept alive by science.
Yeah, I think so.
I would love
Something
to
weird.
I would love to
the
see
medic
how that,
was probably behind it all.
Oh, probably. I would love to see how that conflict evolves over the course of another generation, and to see that played out in more of like a campaign. And I know that would be like,
that could work.
I mean,
Yeah, like a campaign mode, that would be pretty cool.
It could work because it would be such a departure from Team Fortress 2.
Yeah.
So that, people wouldn't be like, oh, it's a Team Fortress title. They'd be like, oh, it's in that universe, but it's not actually like, we're not going to compare it directly to Team Fortress 2.
Yeah.
Which would be good, I think.
Yeah, I agree there. I think if you wanted to make more games in that universe, it's probably going to need to be a different genre.
But the thing is, I don't know that Valve...
I mean, they basically
They
don't
don't
make
care.
games anymore.
They don't care to do that. They made Half-Life Alyx, and it was
Yeah,
very good
it was
game.
phenomenal.
well, we came to the conclusion in the Pikmin episode where we were talking about how awesome a VR Pikmin would be, and it's like, well, they're not going to. Yeah, I know, but let's
You still be
imagine. let's pretend. Let's play pretend for a little while.
Yeah. If Valve still made games,
and they had any passion for Team Fortress anymore.
Yeah.
Sorry, Valve.
I mean,
No,
Half-Life
not sorry.
Alyx was like the first game they made in like 10 years or something.
I'm not sorry, Valve. Prove me wrong.
Yeah, seriously.
If they did change the format of the game to something like I described, or anything you could imagine, would that spark your interest in actually playing the game? Like, what is it do you think has kept you from wanting to actually play the game?
Honestly, for me, I don't really like versus games, unless like it's Smash.
Mhm.
When it comes to shooting games, I'm not very good, so that's why I try to veer away from them.
What if it was cooperative instead of competitive?
I may be a little bit, I may be a little bit more inclined to test it out.
So maybe not buy it, but you'll play a level or two and see how you feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
I think because it is such a really interesting and rich world that has been built up over the course of 20 or
10
15,
years.
15 years.
Oh yeah.
15.
15 G's.
So
Oh,
it's
my
like,
lord.
and the fact that you're as interested and invested in the lore and the stories and all the animations as you are, McKenna, it tells me that it is something that a lot of people would like to make their way into interacting with if it was in a genre that they are more familiar with. Like,
Yeah.
if you like, I can't exactly imagine what, say, an RPG or JRPG
Oh, gosh.
based game would look like,
That would be the most chaotic JRPG ever.
but I would try it.
I mean, that's saying something because JRPGs in general are pretty chaotic.
Well, yeah, some of them.
Yeah.
They've gotten a little weird the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah. Do you guys think that there is we've been talking about you mentioned a couple, but we also talked about Overwatch, and there's an Overwatch 2 coming out.
Mhm.
I had no idea.
Yep.
But do you
They
guys think...
announced it when Blizzard was going through one of their major problems. They were like, "Hey, we're making Overwatch 2. Don't pay attention to the fact that we treat our employees terribly."
You sons
Screw
of
you.
bitches.
Screw you, Blizzard.
I'm in. Would you say that Overwatch is basically like the spiritual successor at this point to...
Not a
Team
spiritual
Fortress 2?
successor,
No.
but it absolutely took a lot of lessons from Team Fortress 2.
Yes.
Didn't take some of them that it should have. I think, especially in terms of level design.
Mhm.
That's, I think, one of Overwatch's biggest weaknesses, actually, in terms of like making it fun.
Yeah, the
is-
levels are actually kind of difficult to traverse.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I understand. I know that people like new characters and new character classes, but I don't really think that it particularly serves the game itself.
versus
Like,
how it would for something like Smash Brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think one big challenge with doing this in shooters is that you just have so many fewer verbs just to do in your game. You know, you're limited by the perspective, you're limited by the fact that it's a shooter, and TF2 I think probably has the most variation in what you can do in a shooter out of basically any shooter that I can think of.
And they did so with only 9 characters.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, and part of that is because they only had 9 characters. And I think, if you look at the mechanics in the game, like, for example, compared to other shooters, in TF2, there are no assault rifles.
Yes.
There are, and, similar guns. And the only automatic guns are either backup weapons for support classes, or it's the heavy's minigun, which is just so profoundly limiting in how you play. And because they eliminated that, basically the bread and butter of most other shooters, if you go play Call of Duty or whatever, basically everybody's running around with an automatic gun.
Yes.
And because they changed that up, they opened up all this other space.
That's true, and I think that's true even if you compare to like Overwatch or Valorant, right? Like you have a lot of these, at least in Overwatch. I actually haven't played Valorant, so I can't say. But Overwatch certainly has a lot of those kinds of automatic weapons that don't limit you in the same way that the heavy's gun does, and are the main weapons for the characters.
Yep.
And they try to like balance it by, adjusting damage values and spread and the character's abilities and all that kind of stuff, but I think it just makes it much more difficult to have a balanced game.
Yep.
Too many variables that you have to work with to make the characters...
It's more that if you have a character like that, the verbs really just become run to enemy, hold cursor over enemy until dead. Just because that's just how it works. When you eliminate that play style, you open up a lot of others. just because players are forced out into other ways of kind of dealing damage, which is the key thing that you do in a shooter like this. So it's like, if you are that kind of player, who do you play in TF2? Maybe you play the heavy, but now you're slow. You have to be really careful about spooling up your gun. Maybe you play the soldier, but now you're like managing a very limited pool of ammunition, and you've got 4 rockets. You're thinking about splash damage.
They move kind of slow.
Yep.
They can be reflected back at you by the pyro.
Yep.
Like the ways in which actually maybe that's a good segue into like the ways in which the weapons and the like classes interact in TF2 is also just so interesting.
Yep.
I guess again, because they have that smaller cast, it's easier to figure out exactly what the interactions would be between each of them. That's a neat touch. I didn't know that the pyro could reflect back. Any other little kernels?
So the pyro can use his air blast to not only reflect rockets from the soldier, but also pills, like the pipe bombs from the demo man. What are they called? The sticky bombs for the demo man. You can push those as well. You can use it to push players back.
Yep.
As well as reflect arrows if the sniper is using the bow. Is there anything else that it can reflect? I think that might be.
I think that's it.
Can it reflect the?
It can reflect
crossbow bolts from the medic.
I don't think so, but it can reflect pyro flares.
Oh yes.
So from other pyros. Okay.
And then also it's very useful in that you can use it to knock people back or knock them off of edges.
I love doing that.
Yeah.
Soldier is rocket jumping near a ledge and just.
Or like one of the best. There's also there's a shotgun for the pyro that mini crits anytime you hit somebody who's been like bumped into the air by a weapon. So you can use the air blast to push somebody up into the air, and then quick switch to your shotgun, and if you can hit them, you get mini crits for extra damage. The pyro also has the axe extinguisher, which is a secondary, like a different melee weapon that also mini crits when you hit a player that is on fire.
Yep.
So
which will generally kill them because it's a melee weapon.
Not anymore, really.
Really?
Yeah. So it used to be that it would crit every time,
okay.
but now it's a mini crit.
Okay.
So the damage is lower. So like a lot of classes will survive. I mean, the scout won't survive, but soldiers and demos will survive if they start the fight at full health.
Gotcha.
And then heavies definitely. And the other thing is that the axe extinguisher now does what the name of the thing.
Oh, it actually
puts them out.
Gotcha.
Well, that leads me to this. This was one of your questions, Sami, but since it seems like you're going to be the most capable of answering it, I'm going to ask it to you. How has TF2 evolved over the years, and do you think the evolution has been good for the game?
Okay.
Oh, were you not ready for this one?
No. No, it's
just a lot to think about.
It was your question.
It's lecture time. No,
sit right back and I'll tell you a tale.
No, I'll try not to take over the entire thing, but it has changed in very significant ways from when it launched, because the ways that a lot of the weapons work have changed. Even the base weapons, they've been rebalanced multiple times, and on the whole, it has, I would say, been good for the game. They've definitely done a good job of making sure there are no weapons that are entirely unbalanced, and there were absolutely like many guns or weapons that came out and were horribly unbalanced.
Yeah.
Some of my favorites being some of the melee weapons, right? I think the axe extinguisher was one that was not necessarily horribly unbalanced, but it was definitely very strong.
Yeah.
And so there were very few pyros who were taking it seriously that didn't run the axe extinguisher for a very long time, because it did so much more damage.
Yeah.
And the axe extinguisher combined so well with the main weapon of the pyro.
Yeah.
Right? Like every single pyro weapon pretty much is a flamethrower, so you're always lighting people on fire. So you always have someone on fire that you can hit with the axe extinguisher.
Yeah.
So having it,
and you're already next to them.
Right. So having a weapon that just does extra damage to someone that's on fire was just way too easy.
Yeah, and I think a big thing was as well, when that came out, you unlocked alternative weapons by getting achievements.
Yes, that's true. You didn't just get them randomly, and you couldn't really buy them.
Yep.
You had to get the achievement. And so, and it wasn't an horribly difficult achievement, I don't think, but but it definitely took some effort.
Yeah, so like I think because you'd get like the more achievements you unlock, the more weapons you'd get, and it required a lot of like some of them required most of the achievements, and that could take a while.
That's true.
I forget which weapon was the last one that Pyro got. I think it may have been the axe extinguisher actually. I know the medic got his melee weapon. It's the last one, and I don't think I ever got it because some of those medic achievements are a pain in the ass.
I did. I got all of the weapons because I played a lot of TF2.
I actually really like that mechanic idea because it's similar to, say, you're playing an MMORPG and you have a weapon that you can only get by completing a really impossible task or really difficult quest, and it's sort of a status symbol. It's like, no, I couldn't have just bought this. Like,
yeah, but I think the problem was that it was a gameplay changing one in a multiplayer game.
Yep.
So,
I mean, and the other thing was at least in the beginning, some of them were strict upgrades.
Yes. So you
weren't
just
grades.
be more effective in the game by having gotten those achievements.
it's not just a different way of doing things;
Right.
it's a better way of doing things.
Yeah.
At the time, right? They've pulled back on most of those things so that those weapons are now more balanced, but they also have added different ways to get the weapons.
Yeah.
You no longer have to.
And I think I do agree with John that there's this very nice elegance to attaching them to achievements. And if they are side grades, I think it's a pretty good way of delivering it. But Valve was very interested in turning TF2 into a free-to-play game with a marketplace, and so they changed it, which is disappointing. It's a lot. I'd say it's just a very different game now because of how you get the weapons, or the game of getting the weapons is very different now. But
maybe again, that mechanic of unlocking things would work better for a cooperative style Team Fortress, because that way you're not at the
or just another. I'd say just another a game that doesn't have a marketplace.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I do actually like it that you can unlock side grades by getting achievements.
I feel like that's less common now. I think now everything is so pay to play that you're basically investing in an NFT, which is like, yeah, you got this cool exclusive weapon, but only because you paid for it.
Yeah, and actually something that you mentioned that it can be kind of a problem to have in a competitive game, having some players by dint of getting achievements, being stronger can be a big problem. I'd actually argue that TF2's design makes it so that it doesn't matter as much, and also TF2 is just generally a more casual game.
That's very true, and I definitely want to touch on that as well, is that the way that the game, especially when you're not playing competitive games, right?
Yep.
Or not playing ranked, which there is a ranked mode now.
There is?
Yes. It has been for years, but I've never played it.
Okay.
Back to the lecture.
But yeah, like the casual mode is not skill-based matchmaking, which is such a huge difference from basically every other multiplayer shooter on the market.
Yeah.
Like there's almost no major games like that, and certainly not in the character-based, or the class-based shooter genre.
So I could hop into a lobby right now and get linked up against somebody who's just like gonna kick my butt up and down the
But
field.
here's the thing: because one, it's 12v12, and two, the guns are the way and the weapons are the way they are. You usually, even if you're not great, you have some chance of occasional, at least, even no matter how bad you are, of sometimes, winning fights with enemies.
Yeah, the mechanics of like the weapon spread, like things like shotguns have crazy spread, can go all over the place. You have crits, which is just sometimes you'll just randomly win because you got a crit, and that was a very intentional design decision.
And it really led to just I think more fun gameplay.
Oh yeah,
but it's also not applicable or not relevant or reasonable for competitive high level competitive play.
Yeah,
right? You can't have a lot of those elements, especially not random crits.
Yeah.
In high level competitive play, because that's just random chance could decide a competitive match that might be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yep.
So you can't do that with a really competitive game, but that's not the goal of TF2.
Yep.
And as somebody who isn't playing it really competitively, it makes it so much more fun.
Yeah,
It really is the Smash Brothers of first-person shooters.
it really is. Yeah.
I can see that. so cool.
Yeah, and it's good to see that they really embraced that, compared to the way that a lot of other companies kind of present their games. TF2 is just completely out in left field. The fact that, for example, there's an achievement for dominating somebody so hard they rage quit.
Yeah.
Other games are like, you need to respect other people in your games. TF2 is like, haha, make him rage quit.
Team Fortress do what Nintendo don't.
And yet, at the same time, like, Team Fortress 2 generally has a community that is pretty positive. Like,
it's better than a League of Legends community. That's
because
for sure.
because it's not so competitive.
Yeah, exactly.
And because I think again, it's not a game that requires the tight coordination of a small group of people in order to have a good time.
Yeah, and also the consequences for being bad are so much less.
Yes.
Compared to playing a MOBA where you're stuck with these people for 20 minutes to over an hour potentially, and you not pulling your weight is just a massive drag on your team. Comparing that, and like if you die, there's all of these consequences, and you're out of the fight for a long time. In TF2, generally, it's like you die, respawn, go die again.
Yeah, and choose scout, just run right back in.
Yeah.
Or like teleporters, or and like all these things that are
Oh,
there to help, are there to like help it be fun.
Yeah.
And also like like the 12v12, it being larger team sizes, any single person doesn't matter as much.
Yep.
It's more about whether or not your team is working together okay. But like having everybody be really, really good at the game doesn't matter nearly as much. Especially when it is random matchmaking, and so you have a wide range of ability. And often, like, the winning team might end up being the one that has, like, the one guy who's, like, crazy good. But most of the time, you can also, if the other team organizes itself, they can take that guy down.
Yep.
And have a chance of fighting back.
Yeah, and also just because of the way that the classes are built, if you are very good, you can have quite the outsized impact, even for classes like some classes, if you are very good, you can have even more impact. But I'd say the skill floor for all of the classes, except maybe the sniper, is pretty low. You can just run in, choose whichever class you want, and do acceptably well.
Or at least feel like you have a chance.
Yeah, exactly. You can just fire rockets off as a soldier all day, and it's like you'll have a moderate impact.
Right. Like, people still have to react to those.
Yeah. Which is great. And if you are very good, you have that outsized impact, but it's not the same as in other games where it's just like you're going to completely take over the game. Even the best sniper, which
can't carry a whole team.
Can't carry a whole team. Yeah. Eventually, you're just going to get stabbed.
Yes.
So a little while ago, I was drawing a comparison, and I guess throughout this whole thing we have been to Overwatch. But I do want to throw one other title out there from recent years that I think, while being a pretty different style of game, could arguably have said to have sort of taken the same spot in gamers' culture, or is starting to, that Team Fortress once had or still does hold. What do you guys think about Fortnite?
Oh no!
Not in terms of how good the gameplay is, but just like the cultural impact. How does that compare to the cultural impact of like Team Fortress 2?
I think I think on culture as a whole, it has had perhaps even a larger impact. Just it has created so many young gamers. It's had a absolutely massive impact, and I think has probably made a lot more money than TF2.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Fortnite's basically still bankrolling the Epic Game Store.
Yeah.
Plus, I think are they doing things like copywriting some of the dances that are on there?
They did try to copyright a dance, but I don't remember the result of that.
It failed horribly because dances can't be copyrighted.
Well, and also didn't they copy that dance from somewhere else originally? Anyways?
Yeah, they did.
And
they tried to somebody tried to sue them for copying their dance, and that lawsuit fell through too. So
and I mean, Fortnite also is. They've just like expanded it out into this kind of like I mentioned before, into this whole ecosystem, but the ecosystem, they've really brought it back into their game, into the engine. in a way that TF2 never did.
That's true. And also, I think Fortnite doesn't have quite as much of an identity of its own necessarily.
No, not at all.
Because
it keeps pulling from other
because
media.
it pulls from every other piece of media that they can get their hands on.
You want to be Spider-Man fighting Luke Skywalker? You go for it.
Yeah. Fortnite has very much become a platform now rather than a game.
Mm-hmm.
It is a platform that you play a game on, but
Yeah, I played Fortnite for a little bit when it was like fairly new, but it was just I didn't have that much fun with it.
So what do you think made it so successful, like even as compared to Team Fortress 2? Like it's that much bigger in the culture. Do you think it was just like all the fun goofy dances? Because Team Fortress had some of those.
no. So I think
Timing is part of it.
yeah. So I think a big part of it is one, timing. Two, battle royale genre was very popular, and the most at the time when it came out with their battle royale mode, the big game. The big battle royale game was PUBG, which was one, very different, two, not very kid friendly,
And 3 janky.
yeah, and the other thing was that it was janky as all hell.
Whereas Fortnite was actually ran well.
Yep.
It and like the graphics look fun.
Yep.
They're colorful.
Yeah, they're colorful, but it also is not incredibly hard on hardware.
Yep.
And so many people were able to play it. I mean, I think the other big thing that really helped Fortnite grow was the fact that they created a mobile version of it.
Yep. They created a
and
mobile
so,
version of it.
Tons of people who didn't own a PC suddenly started playing Fortnite.
Yep.
And they were playing the full game. So that was like a big moment as well. Is
Yeah, and
moving
also
it
they
to a public platform or like to a mobile platform.
yeah, and also just the way that the game is built. It's much more of an arcadey style game, while PUBG was this kind of hardcore, gritty shooter where you hide in grass for an hour and then get sniped in the head. Well, in Fortnite, you're just kind of running around doing
And
shit.
you're building things. Like, I think that was another reason why it got super popular.
I actually
because-
disagree. I think the building mode is this kind of awkward addition that was there because it was in the game that they based it on,
Yeah.
and it just kind of was there.
But you think
I honestly, with drawing like a comparison to something like, say, Minecraft, which also
That's
kind of
true.
exploded,
Mhm.
I think that kind of helped. So it was kind of like a cross between a shooter and Minecraft.
Well, and I think there is like something to that as well in the fact that like being good at building is a very different skill set from being good at shooters.
That is
Yeah.
true.
And
That
so
is true.
there's a lot of people who got good at building who weren't very good at like the Twitch gameplay, of shooters.
Mhm.
And so, but being good at building allowed them to do well.
That is true.
So it brings in a different audience of people who wouldn't otherwise have played a battle royale shooter.
Yeah, exactly. As much as I like to rip on Fortnite, like, I think that they did some good things.
They had a good formula, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
so jumping from there, do you think there are any lessons that the Team Fortress 2 could pull from Fortnite if it were made today that would have improved
No.
Team Fortress 2?
I don't think so.
Anything?
Like, they are different games. They're, like, yes, they're sort of the same genre, but in the fact that they're shooters, but I'm not really sure if it's quite...
What about like the accessibility? Like you said, the fact that people could play it on their phones versus we were just talking earlier about how one of the big controversies at the time is that you needed a Steam account if you wanted to play Team Fortress 2.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, now you also need an Epic Games account to play Fortnite, but
Oh, well, yeah.
but also that's a timing difference as well, right? Like,
Yeah.
That it came out in 2016 or something. So
Yeah.
like it was-
Everything's a subscription now.
right.
Like,
Yeah. So that wasn't like a new thing, and it wasn't an issue for Fortnite. But I think, maybe the mobile thing, but like I don't think that. I don't know if it would do as well. Like
Yeah.
there's been a decent number of other games that have tried to make mobile,
Mobile first-person shooters where
yeah, and it usually doesn't.
yeah, it usually fails horribly. I mean, I think TF2 is one of the few shooters that probably could work on a mobile device.
True. Yeah, because you don't need a ton of buttons.
You don't need a ton of buttons, and you don't need that like Twitch precision shooting that a lot of other shooters require.
Except maybe if you're playing Sniper.
Yeah.
Unless you're playing Sniper.
Yeah.
I mean, Sniper is very much that. It's kind of funny. It's the one class that kind of breaks some of the rules about TF2's gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is a Twitch. single shot,
Hit scan.
yeah, hit scan weapon and everything. That's why some people really gravitate towards it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like people who are used to FPSs will probably be most comfortable either playing the sniper or maybe the soldier, but I would say probably more so the sniper.
Yeah.
Because it's the most that functions like it would in any other
Mm-hmm.
game of that genre.
Yeah. What's funny though is that the rest of the game is built in a way that doesn't, the presence of a sniper doesn't break the game.
Mm-hmm.
However, I will say it is notable that on many servers the number of snipers is limited.
Mm-hmm.
You can only have like 2 per team or whatever, just because if you do stack them, it becomes obnoxious. And kind of breaks the game's balance if you have like 8 snipers or something.
Most of the time, though, the sniper team's gonna lose.
Yes, it's just not fun anymore.
Yeah.
They're gonna, one good demo man is going to take care of that.
I think another thing that makes games like Fortnite a little more accessible is that there's less of an emphasis on the support style of champion. So like if you were to try to do Team Fortress and a Battle Royale, I guess you would call it Team with an I somewhere in it, like Fortress, you probably wouldn't play as much as the medic. Maybe the engineer, I guess, would work.
You could do like team-based battle royale.
Oh yeah, like a large team battle royale.
Yeah,
That would be kind of interesting.
it would be.
It'd be
25
chaotic
versus
AF, but
25.
No, like
Or like,
Like-
nine-person squads.
Oh man, 9v9,
Oh.
v9, v9, v9.
oh
all the way to
no.
99.
Yeah, and that actually brings up another thing, which is that TF2 is very much a product of its time.
Yeah.
And in some ways that limits it, where it was like when it came out, it was this server-based game where people would like start up a server and they like kind of controlled it. And I guess there were Valve official servers as well.
Yeah, but most people played on servers that just somebody had set up.
Yeah. And that meant because gaming hadn't made the transition entirely to the cloud yet, things like battle royales weren't even possible back then.
Well, also just like architecturally, right? Like
Yeah.
games of that size were very, very difficult to try to make happen.
Yeah. It just wasn't technically feasible back
Yeah.
then.
Well, I mean,
And
unless
if
you
you-
look at like PlanetSide 2.
That was a lot later though.
Not that much later.
Really?
The DX9 game.
But also
Like 2 years.
PlanetSide. Also, it was heavily limited.
PlanetSide 2?
Yeah.
Limited by... Like, in what way?
I'm actually unfamiliar with this title. Have you?
I've heard the name dropped in our house, but not really familiar with what it is.
It's a big like.
Okay, so it did release in 2012, but it was a sequel to PlanetSide, which released in 2003. But PlanetSide 2 is, I mean, I won't go into it too much, but it's a very, very large scale shooter on a scale that no other game has done. Literally, you have up to 1,000 people on a single map.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's a very large map, but it is literally 1,000 people on one map at one time.
How is the map design?
Great. It's good.
It does its job. It houses 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was going to get into, you were talking about how the way that Team Fortress 2 was built it makes it so that the presence of a sniper, while different functionally from almost every other class in the fact that it works on such precision and twitch clicking, the sniper still doesn't break any game that it's a part of. And I think most likely a really big part of that is the level design. And so far, somehow we have not spoken about the stages. So
I can go ahead and start. So one of the big things, we got into this because we were talking about the sniper's impact on the game, and one of the important things that the TF2 level designers have done is break their stages up. A lot of shooter stages are either often have very long sight lines, where you have these big, like a long street or just like an open field with like buildings in it. When you have big long sight lines like this, it means that you get a lot of this kind of long distance play, and when you have a sniper in the game, they are going to kind of dominate that, or the entire game is kind of going to become sniping. In TF2, basically none of the levels have these extremely long sight lines. There's either buildings in the middle that you have to pass through.
Geography,
yeah.
terrain.
Or there's like even in linear levels, there's like kinks in the level deliberately to make it so that snipers can't snipe down the whole level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like really, there's very few places where a sniper can fire from and not get shot at successfully by something else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like even with the slow travel speed of the rockets for the soldier, it's still a very, very effective tool for at least disrupting a sniper.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I'd say like the canonical sniper spot is that second floor place in 2 Fort.
Yes.
And you know, you've got the covered bridge in the center. You know, scouts can jump along that if they want to go up and disrupt snipers. And like you said, you can always, you know, soldiers or demos can disrupt
Rocket or
them.
sticky jump.
Yeah.
Or you can completely ignore it and go below through the
Yep.
tunnels and underneath the level. So even if there's a really good sniper, they're not going to be able to do anything to you because they can't see you when you're down there.
Yeah. And, you know, you can just fire rockets at them and suppress them. You know, they can't.
Because they don't have the health to just tank that.
Yeah.
Would you say Team Fort is like the box cannon of Team Fortress 2?
Yeah.
Like, that's the sort of like classic way to play.
It's one of fairly few. I mean, I guess a lot of the capture the flag maps are like this, but like capture the flag are really the only maps I think that really have like fully mirrored. Well, I guess some of the like push maps as well.
Yeah.
Those are fairly mirrored, but yeah, there's a reason why I play mostly like attack defense or payload maps.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just much more interesting to play maps that are not symmetrical.
Yeah, I would actually say that capture the flag is not my favorite game mode.
Yeah.
It's very swingy. And I think the game's mechanics lend itself better to point defense. And
I always played attack defend. So my favorite was Dust Bowl.
Dust Bowl's a great map.
Yeah.
Dust Bowl is a really good map.
Yeah.
I just really like that aesthetic. I'm not sure why, but to me it does have that kind of like rustic, almost like Western type feel to it. Like everything, you got literal Dust Bowl, so
Yeah.
you just shooting about. But even then, it's like, again, I was just looking back over like an overview map of Dust Bowl, and it's like divided into like, depending on who's how you break it up, like anywhere from like 5 to even like 10 areas. You know, like this is where a lot of combat, like on the wiki there's like different images with like arrows pointing out like different kind of like gameplay loops you can find yourself in any given match on this map. It just goes to show how much time and effort people have put into like figuring out and optimizing this, you know, silly game.
And I think there's like another really important sort of interaction between the character design and the level design, and that's specifically the engineer and its ability to set up forward bases.
Yep.
Because this is one of the like most frustrating things to me about Overwatch and its map design is that it also has similar like they do something similarly in that a lot of those attack defense maps or payload maps they have this situation where at the beginning of the game the defenders have a really long way to go from their spawn point to the defense point, and the attackers have a short distance. And so and then like as the attackers push, that balance shifts towards where the defenders have a short distance to go to the defense point, and the attackers have a long distance to get to the attack point. And there's this problem with Overwatch where that means that when you're defending, you feel like it's impossible for you to defend at first, and then you'll rally and kind of successfully defend the last point, which sometimes feels good, but sometimes it just feels like, oh, we just got lucky that we managed to turn things around. And then on the attacking side, you have the opposite problem where you're like, you start out and you're like, oh yeah, we went through that first one so easy, and then you get mired down in this long slog to try to push that second point, and it feels really bad even if you win.
Yeah, and another thing that TF2 does very intelligently is they have multiple spawn areas for each team that change based on how far you are in the map.
Overwatch does as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
but But I think the key difference is that, one, the distance between the spawn point and the contested point, I think is a little bit shorter with TF2 in terms of the amount of time it takes you to get, walk from the spawn point to the area where you're, focusing on the fight or the objective. But the other thing is the engineer and their teleporter and sentry together allow attackers to set up a sentry gun, or even several if you're really trying to be serious about holding an area, and then teleporters to get your team up there even as they die.
Yep.
And then the opposite on the defense, right? You can hold that first point sometimes just because you have the teleporters up, and so you have constant reinforcements coming in so much quicker than they would if they had to walk all the way over there.
Yeah.
And that makes such a huge difference to how, even a battle that normally or otherwise would be very, very difficult for the defenders to hold that first point, or very, very difficult for attackers to capture that last point, it becomes so much more balanced because of the engineering.
I agree. And that really, it makes the game, it completely changes the game's dynamics, because it sets up sub-objectives where, now it's okay, in order to take this point, we need to get rid of the defender's engineer's stuff so that we can cut off their reinforcements.
Or, when you're attacking, we need to capture this part of the map that doesn't have an actual objective, but we're going to make it into an objective for the enemy to have to try to attack.
Yep.
Because we set up a base there, and so now that becomes a flashpoint.
Yep.
Whereas, and so then, also the other thing is, I think it makes it for much more interesting, interplay where you can set up get ready for a team push, but the other team, especially if you have those engineers, the other team's going to know way better where that team push is probably going to come from, because it's probably going to come from the place that has the sentry guns and the teleporters.
Yep.
It's not going to come from the other side. That's the other route that you might get. You're not going to have the whole team coming from over there. They're going to come from where the sentries are, because they're also trying to hold that spot.
Yeah.
And again,
unless you're sneaky as hell.
Right. Or you might have a smaller push, and that's good to also try to split up enemy focus. But that's again another issue I think that games like Overwatch have, where you, as a defender, you almost never know where the next push is going to come from until just before it comes.
Yeah, and it really speaks to both the level design, where they have to be very careful about where can engineers build things. If certain areas are too well protected and access is too limited, it can become incredibly difficult to just lodge engineers from in there, even with a good demo. But also it speaks to the character design, where it has, the engineer itself, the design has to be very careful, and then the engineer's counters.
Yes, yeah, being able to push into a sentry nest and take it out is so important. And they've added more, tools both for engineers to successfully defend their areas, but also for other classes to attack them. Things like the I forget which one it is, but it's the Demo Man's launcher that only has two, and they also don't bounce. You have to hit directly, but that one will fire both of those, and it will kill a level 3 sentry, unless it's being actively healed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's so interesting that with the engineer update, they introduced the thing that lets you remote control the turret, rather than giving them a a stronger turret or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they did, what was it? The alternative turret was the mini turrets.
Yes.
Yeah.
And those can be really fun to play with, especially if you know where all of the metal is on the map, so that you can just run around dropping mini sentries whenever the previous one dies. So that can be a pretty fun way, because you can then very quickly put up a sentry that isn't as dangerous, but can catch players off guard.
Yeah.
And then especially if you do it with combine that with the shotgun that's the Frontier Justice, yeah, that you get revenge crits if you for any if your sentry got kills and then gets destroyed, you get crits for however many kills the sentry had, guaranteed with your shotgun. It's gonna be really fun.
Yeah,
what's so cool about all these strategies that you're saying is you can go into depth describing each and everything that you're doing with each whether you're baiting, luring, all of that. When you actually see it happening being done by somebody who's like really capable at the game. I did watch a lot of playthroughs of like, or not playthroughs, let's plays of people who are like really skilled at the game, and like they'll describe it at about the speed that you're saying it. But just like any speedrunner, like when they're actually doing it with their hands, they're like everything's moving super quickly. They're setting up these turrets really fast. Like it's like, how did you get the muscle memory to be able to put that turret? Exactly, yeah. And then like remote controlling your turret, like oh geez, like the whole reason I want to do engineer is so I don't have to, so it can be automated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting that the engineer specifically really turns the game from a shooter into more of a more of a strategy game.
And I think it helps create team play without people needing to consciously be doing it.
Yep.
Creak.
So McKenna, you had said that you had a story you wanted to tell.
Oh yeah.
About meeting a certain somebody.
Well, certain somebodies.
Certain somebodies. Sorry.
It's all good. Back in 2017, Sami and I went to PAX for the first time. It was a really, really fun experience. Definitely go there if you ever have the opportunity. Anyway, there was a panel there called The Voices of Valve. And two very notable voice actors that we both know and adore, John Patrick Laurie and Ellen McLean, his wife. They're staples in the Valve voice acting team. They're both voice coaches. They're just really remarkable people. John Patrick Laurie voiced the sniper in TF2. And Ellen, you may know her as GLaDOS, but she also voiced the announcer for TF2. So,
and the Overwatch in Half-Life 2.
Yep.
So
the Overwatch is a character in Half-Life.
The Overwatch is like the
hive mind, sort of.
It's like it's the sort of announcer female voice that sends out the alerts to the Combine forces in Half-Life 2.
So she's got a very announcer.
Well, she can do a very good announcer voice, but then she also does the GLaDOS voice, which is very much not an announcer voice.
Yeah, then in Dota 2, she also voiced the Spider Queen, so lots and lots of weird noises for that. But anyway, we got to meet them. We had a nice chat with them afterwards, and I stood in line for a bit of time to get a signed poster from them. So we actually still have this poster. We're trying to figure out a good place to hang it up. It's just such a wonderful, sort of reminder. And they custom signed it for us with some of their characters' catchphrases. With Ellen McLean, her message to us was, "McKenna and Sami, there will be cake, GLaDOS."
Oh, that's so cool.
And, of course, Sniper, boom, headshot.
That's so cool. It's crazy how far the medium of video games has come. From the 90s, we were talking earlier about, Tomb Raider and, Resident Evil for the PlayStation. And I think what I was saying was, how did they even get the direction to be as silly as they were?
Yeah,
voice acting wise,
voice acting back in the 90s was weird.
And I wouldn't see myself waiting in line for an hour to get a signature from Chris Redfield's voice actor. But now, if I could get in line and get the voice actor who did any of these people, I mean, minus Soldier, but especially Soldier, if I could wait in a line and get the autograph from him, yeah, I totally would. But these voices are so iconic, and it's not even more they're very realistic. They're still very outlandish and kind of crazy, but they do feel like rounded characters that are being and all of that is coming from the portrayal. We watched that whole Meet the Sandwich short, and it's just
he punched out all my blood.
Oh my god, he punched out all my blood.
Yeah, one, they managed to tell a story in a minute.
Yeah.
And two, they tell a story in a minute in which you only see the hand of the heavy reach into the refrigerator and grab the sandwich.
And the rest of it is just the inside of the fridge getting shaken up by whatever's going on outside. And it's like we were talking about, like, I wonder how much of that like was ad-libbed or if it was all scripted. It almost doesn't matter. It was really the inflections, the way that those were delivered that really sold it. And those are the characters that make up this game.
Yeah.
And it's nuts how different it would have been if they had literally any other voices for any of the characters.
Yeah. And I mean, another thing is just how well written everything is, and how much there is. There's so much contextual voice acting in the game. You know, for example, you know, all the little lines that they say, you know, when they're dominating or when they're getting dominated, or, you know, even just like pushing the bomb cart.
Yeah.
You know, push little cart. And, you know, compared to, you know, because there are only 9 characters, because they have such good relationships with their voice actors, they can do that. And I mean, there's so much voice acting.
There is a lot of voice lines for every single character.
Yeah.
And you hear them all the time.
Yep.
In the game. You
know, I think they basically have lines from every character to every other character.
Which is impressive.
Which is 81 relationships.
Even if it's just one. Like, yeah, 81 relationships, and there's probably multiple lines that they say back and forth to each other. And
which is not something you can do when you have 150 characters like League of Legends.
Yep.
You know, I think even, you know, original OG League of Legends, you know, they might have like 15 lines total for a single champion.
It's kind of like some fighting games have been doing that. Some, like, the later Mortal Kombats do that. Marvel vs. Capcom, and I think Injustice all did that, where it's like, depending on which 2 characters are going up against each other at the start of a battle, like they'll have like some kind of a unique exchange. But even then, sometimes it's almost like one person's saying something and the other person's replying something that could have been a response to any of a number of the other things that people say.
Yeah.
So it's like, did they really script that as a specific one-on-one interaction?
I think there's also one other thing that, like, I really enjoy about the characterization and the lore, like, I guess you could call it the lore of TF2, is that it never really takes itself seriously.
Yeah.
Right? And, like, the writers are very well aware that the characters they're writing are psychopaths.
Right.
Like, all of them are psychopathic in some way.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I used the word insane quite a few times earlier.
Yeah.
And that's not an exaggeration. These characters are psychopaths.
They are crazy.
But then when you dig
crazy
into the lore,
pants.
it makes sense. Like,
a little bit,
the world that's built. Yeah.
But like, what I mean is that it's not trying to be too wholesome.
It's not trying to be too wholesome, and it's not trying to be too serious either.
Yeah.
You know, it's not gritty in the slightest, even though these people are murdering each other.
Exactly.
It's
and I think
fun romp.
Right, and I think that's one of the things that always kind of bothered me about some of the later ones, where they try to have this, like, really, you know, heartfelt, you know, like, lore behind the characters, and then they go and fight each other and try to kill each other, and you're like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Like the whole Overwatch story. Like, we have to get the Overwatch back together, and
then fight other Overwatch
Right.
characters.
And it's
For
like,
some reason.
what?
Whereas
What
here
is
it's just
happening?
like they're just gonna fight each other because
They're mercenaries and they're insane.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll fight with each other. Sometimes they'll fight again. What's the job?
Sometimes
they'll fight
they're
against themselves.
Yeah, sometimes there's multiples of them. We don't really talk about it, but I mean, it's canonical.
Yeah.
When I was doing a little bit of research into the lore, by research I mean I watched a YouTube video about the lore. That's where I found out about, like, how it all started as a feud between 2 brothers. But, like, there's all these little silly things, like how Abraham Lincoln invented rocket jumping. Just super, super charming. And it's like, yeah, I think it all to me comes down to the voices. The voices really made the identity of the game.
Yeah.
I think everything really came from that.
Yeah, one thing that I liked about it, you know, because it's a continuously updated game, and because it's just a, you know, the game that it is, they don't have that problem with, like, Marvel vs. Capcom that you described, where it's like, oh, 2 people are fighting and they need to have sort of an exchange.
they just kind of play voice lines when they're contextually appropriate, and they started out with a moderate number of them with a moderate number of situations, and they just kept building on it.
Yeah.
So that because of that, because there isn't quite that expectation, they can get away with just kind of putting the voice lines in where they work best, rather than needing one for every situation that and players are going to be like, well, that didn't sound very good for that situation. There's only a few where it's like, okay, like the domination lines, are a big one where it's like, okay, those need to be good.
Yeah.
But and of course, because they have amazing writing, it's like every time it's like, okay, if I'm a soldier and got dominated by a spy, then it's gonna be they're gonna have something special for that particular situation.
It just feels so like the characters definitely feel real.
But also like ones that you'd never want to actually meet in real life.
No.
maybe like no, I was gonna say like if I could like interview one of them, but then you probably like I can't imagine a single character that you could like go in for like an interview with and still walk out of there alive.
Right?
Like, something, even if it's not them, like some things just happen around them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would never actually want to meet the Pyro IRL.
No.
Especially the Pyro. I think that with other ones, I think that I might be okay, but the Pyro
is actively delusional about the state of reality around it.
Yes.
Speaking of, I always thought it would be kind of a neat mod if you're playing as the Pyro, you can kind of see the world looks a little bit more like it does through his eyes, and that's short.
There's a head, like a hat that the Pyro can wear that will give him
Pyro vision.
Oh, so it's like all rainbows and
that's amazing.
Oh my god! How did I not come across that? Oh, speaking of the hats,
we need to talk about
the hats. Talk about the hats. It's Hat Simulator.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That one graph that's just like both axes are hats.
I mean, I never got too big into like collecting the hats and everything, but I think it's similar to what we were talking about originally with the different weapon unlocks, right? Like they're locked behind the achievements sometimes, or
originally they were.
But there were only a few. But like now, there's so many hats, and you kind of get them just with time.
Yeah,
and they're not just cosmetic anymore. I mean, they do stuff. I mean, some of them do stuff.
Well,
they do cosmetic things.
Yeah,
like change the way the Pyro sees the world. But
and there's not very many of those actually.
No?
Most of them, most of the hats don't do anything. They just they're on your character model.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hats are a big thing.
Yeah, and that it's hats are interesting because they show off something that happens with games that are that spend a long time being developed after being released, which is that the game's visual style starts to kind of slowly break down
a little bit.
Especially with kind of the wilder hats. You mentioned that for the most part you can still tell what class a character is, but sometimes it does get tough.
Really?
Yeah.
Which one specifically do you feel makes?
I couldn't tell you because I don't know the hats off the top of my head, but some of them are pretty extensive.
I could see, and I don't know the hats, but just going by body shape, if you were to line up the demo man, the soldier, and maybe even the engineer, and put the right hats on them, you'd probably be able to notice with like any amount of scrutiny. But again, if you're playing in a really quick game, you're coming around a corner and you see a character and you're trying to decide which one it is. Like if they're wearing the right hat, I might be like, is that the demo man or is that the soldier? I would have to look at the weapon maybe, but it would take me that little. I'm obviously not as highly trained at it, but like it would take me a little bit longer to figure out.
Yeah, though I can see a little bit of it because yes, obviously like some of the hats, especially like the towering pile of hats.
Oh yeah,
it's a big hat. But at the same time, it is all only hats, thankfully.
Yes.
And there are other cosmetic items as well, but they did do a good job of not having the cosmetic items change the base silhouette of the character.
Yes.
Which is an issue with some other games where like the actual silhouette of the character changes a little bit depending on what skin you have on them, and that's really
bad.
Yeah.
That's really bad.
In a game where you want to be able to figure out what you're up against, like right away, because
I think the thing that actually probably broke down the most was the color scheme of the game, where some hats do break the color scheme. Where
from red to blue.
Well, like if you look at the color palette of vanilla TF2, it's pretty limited. There's lots of browns and grays, and then you've got these kind of desaturated reds and blues for the team colors, and that's about it. But once you start adding in some of the wilder hats, you have all these bright colors that look a little bit out of place. It's not the end of the world by any means, but it does break the color palette did break down a little bit.
Does it make it a little harder to tell your team from the other?
I don't think it's a huge deal. It's more aesthetic.
Okay.
Yeah, because overall the color palette, like you said, is very clean and minimal in TF2, except for some of the cosmetic items for the characters.
Yeah.
I have related to this, I wanted to ask, what do you think is the rarest item that you have?
So almost all the items that I have are pre-store. So they're all that I forget.
Original?
Yeah, it's all the like vintage items.
Yeah. Oh, vintage. Yeah, that's there.
As for what's the rarest, I don't think I have any particularly rare items, but I've got like vintage weapons for most of the characters.
Because I've got two.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Actually, no, I'm pretty sure I know which one's rare. But the less rare one is the Apple earpods or earphones. So they have like the like the white like the Apple earbuds.
I remember everybody had those for a while.
Yes, but it was only available for a limited time.
Right.
You could only get them during a specific time span by logging into your Steam account on an Apple computer.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
And after that happened, you could never get them again. So it was one of those items that like a lot of people got at that time, but if you missed that, that was it.
That was
you could
it.
never get them again. And so like for a long time, the price of the buying a pair of those earbuds was like used as a sort of a major measure of how the TF2 market was doing.
Interesting.
Because you could sell items from person to
for
person.
real money.
And
so I've sold some items.
Nice.
Mostly things that I had duplicates of that somebody wanted, but I had no use for.
I had friends who used to do that on like RuneScape.
Mm-hmm.
They would grind for like a dragon scimitar,
and then the other one is the Gentleman's Service Medal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you even recall where this came from, but there was another event where if you were really paying attention to the TF2 community, Valve was like, "Hey, we have 10,000 of these. Go to the TF2 website and claim yours. And once they're gone, they're gone."
Is that probably even fewer than the number of people who got the...
Oh, way fewer.
Yeah.
I have number 8,800 and something odd.
Nice.
And
it actually has the number on there.
It does have the number, yeah.
Isn't that basically an NFT?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's
NFT hats.
I think it's not tradable though, so it's tied to my account, and I'm not giving that up. But it is literally one of 10,000 of those, and I'm pretty sure I claimed mine like 3 hours after they released it.
Wow.
So they went quick.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, that is definitely the rarest item that I have in I think any of that kind in any game.
Do you wear it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's on. I think it's on pretty much all of my characters. As they're like sort of on the chest, the metal slot or whatever. Because there are some others that you can put on there, but yeah, it's like
that's the default.
Yeah, because I also have like the veteran badge because I got the game at the very beginning and a couple others. But that one is the one I'm just like. Very few people who play the game still have this.
Yeah. I'm thinking like, oh, my rarest item is probably like a vintage back burner or something.
I think I have a boot hat. I don't know. I never got super into the collecting the items. It was really more of a a platform for me to just engage with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's really cool that that's an option available to it. Like,
And that it doesn't impact the gameplay.
Unless you're wearing the pirate's hat.
Well, yeah, but like, it doesn't really give you an advantage.
Yeah.
Just changes the custom. That would be the coolest. I would be wearing that all the time.
Do you believe in magic?
Does it only work for the pyro?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think so.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah. Are there any? Or do you guys remember any of the like majorly really overpowered weapons? So I think we talked a little bit about the axe extinguisher, but there were a couple more that I wanted to talk about.
I don't. But...
Let's see. So I remember when rocket spam was a huge problem in early TF2. What else for like actual items? Backburner was really strong for a while. What do you have in mind?
There's 2 melee weapons for the Demo Man that were both at one point or other pretty badly overpowered. You know the half of Zatoichi?
It's like a katana.
It's
or
the
something?
katana.
Yeah.
And it used to be that 1, it could crit. 2, when you got a kill with it, you immediately got your health restored to 100%.
Oh, I remember
No
that.
matter how low you were, you got 100% health, and you could crit with it. And the thing about melee in TF2 is that basically there's like, so crits in TF2 are not entirely random. They actually have like a sort of a ramping likelihood where as you do damage, the likelihood of a crit increases up to a certain point. It's pretty low for most weapons, but it's much higher for melee weapons, and it goes up to I think like 25% chance or something like that of a crit. And so melee weapons that could crit get crits pretty often. The only problem was that the half Zatoichi, first of all, when you combined it with the charging charge, which is the shield that allows you to use the charge ability, at the end of that charge you get a automatic crit. If you time it right, so you automatically get a crit, and then because you've done a large amount of damage, if you can hit with that crit, you've done a large amount of damage, which means that your base chance of getting another crit is basically as high as it can be. So the chances of getting a second crit after the first one are about as high as it's possible in the game. So if you get that crit off and you hit somebody, then you have a decent chance of critting again,
and that will kill them.
and that will kill basically anybody.
Yeah.
In 2 hits. And you also have used charge ability that got you to them much faster than they can get away from you. So, and then on top of that is the fact that if you get that crit and you get the kill, you're all of a sudden, no matter how much damage you took charging at them, now you're at 100% health. So then you can just go to the next person. It used to be that you could charge in, and the other thing is that the charging charge reduces both explosive and fire damage that you take by a significant portion. So you take less damage from explosives, which is like Demomen and soldiers.
Oh
do
yeah,
less
I
damage to
remember
you.
when this was popular.
And pyros do less damage to you because it reduces fire damage. So the only thing that was really a good counter to a charge and charge demo was a heavy, especially one with the Natasha, which slows down players.
Yeah.
So you could, if you timed it right, you could charge an entire group, almost an entire team of closely clumped enemies, and then crit again, and then you could almost just constantly keep meleeing people and getting crits every 3 or 4 swings, getting kills, and going back up to full health, and they basically couldn't kill you. There was another weapon though that was worse. And it was I forget what it's called, but it's the scimitar. But same kind of idea. But when it first came out, it had a couple of things. One, when you killed somebody, they dropped they basically dropped ammo, and ammo healed you when you had that particular weapon equipped. So it would heal you, and and if you didn't need the health, it would just leave something that's basically a health item there for you to pick up later if you need it. you used it with the Splendid screen because I believe it was that one that, and then you'd use it with there was another it was like an Arabic themed set of items, but it was like the Sultan's moccasins or something, so it was like the shoes. And this combination, and I don't remember which item did what, but basically that combination of items allowed you to heal up from ammo packs. When you killed people, they would drop ammo packs. When you successfully got a crit, or if you got a kill with the crit at the end of your charge would immediately recharge all the way up, so you could use it again.
Oh no!
And the footwear made it so that you would turn much more quickly while you were charging. So you just had if you were a good demo knight, you could basically go charge and it was like whoop, and turn, and nobody could avoid you. Then you get a crit on your swing. If you got a kill with that, then you could just go charge again. And you were healing, you were moving very fast, and you were able to do it over and over again.
Yep.
You were God.
It was ridiculous.
You're God if you can do all that.
Yeah.
And that was one that they patched within about a week or two of releasing that weapon. But man, it was fun, but also horribly broken when it first came out.
Yeah. So in basically vanilla TF2, there was the problem that I mentioned, which was rocket spam, where you basically get a whole bunch of soldiers and you just fire rockets everywhere, kind of at long range. And the way that they eventually dealt with that was that in base game Pyro didn't have air blast.
Oh yeah.
So at one point they gave Pyro air blast, which can reflect rockets, and now it's like, oh, you actually kind of need to be careful about where you're firing your rockets. Because if you especially if you get a crit rocket, reflecting a crit rocket will probably kill you.
Yes. And even if it's not a crit rocket, having it reflected back at you causes the rocket to fly back at you faster than it normally does when you fire it.
Yep.
And it gives it mini crits.
Yep.
So yeah, having a rocket reflected back at you is very, very bad.
Yeah. And that now it's like, oh, they have a bunch of soldiers, just play Pyro. Easy peasy.
This game is so deep.
It is.
I always like talking to you guys about this stuff because I never come to fully understand these games as deeply as you guys do. It's really nice.
Hyper focus is a hell of a thing, man.
When you're jumping from game to game, it's like you can only focus so much.
For sure.
When we eventually do the Minecraft episode,
Oh, man.
God, I'm gonna have a lot to talk about.
Oh man, there's
And
a lot of
Factorio,
controversy.
sure. In the meantime, we're coming up on 2 hours here in a couple of minutes. So
I think we've pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, I think enough.
Any final thoughts?
I'm sure.
Go play TF2.
Yeah, if you haven't already somehow.
I'm sure Sami could
Or at least-
probably
Or watch
Go
it.
another
watching
go
stuff.
another couple of hours just talking about updates.
Maybe we could do a part 2 of this one.
I could easily see a bonus cast episode coming out sometime in the middle of a week.
Oh yeah. Sami talks about broken demo night builds for an hour.
Get a whiteboard up. We'll make it a YouTube video.
And I'll just make cocktails, I guess.
No, you just have to add on to the end of it ASMR.
Yeah.
Sami rants about demo night builds.
Super gentle voice, just
I do have one very short thing that I wanted to mention. That was one of my favorite things that I did back in the day when there was the axe extinguisher, and and there was a reskinned version of the axe extinguisher that was the Postman's pillbox or something. I forget what it was called, but it was a mailbox. It was a mailbox on the post that it would be on, and that was it was basically just a reskin of the axe extinguisher. And I bound a macro to a key on my keyboard that when I got a kill, I would hit that macro and it would put into the server wide chat, "You've got mail."
Oh my god.
What a shitter.
It seems like such a scout move.
yeah.
That's great.
Also, speaking of Scout, I'm just gonna throw this in here. So the voice of Scout, he is the youngest cast member, and he also used to play TF2 pretty religiously. Guess who his main character was?
Was it the Scout?
No!
Was it the spy?
No!
What?
It was the Heavy!
It's kind of like the opposite character.
Yeah.
He was like, it just felt really weird listening to myself over and over whenever I played the Scout.
I can understand
that would be quite strange.
But then if you have to kill a scout and then you hear yourself talking back to you,
That would be really weird.
that would be so weird.
You're like a car crash in slow motion. It's like I'm watching you fly through a window.
Hey, me, that was mean. Well, thank you guys so much for being a part of this. As always, I feel like I've learned just a lot by talking to you guys around this table, and I love doing this with you all.
Yay!
Thank you, McKenna and Sami, for being on. Adrien, thank you for being on and for hosting.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, honestly, McKenna, you were here hosting too, so like.
Thanks for having us all
Yeah.
on the podcast.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks you all for being on it. Until next time, everybody, stay nerdy.
And outro.